Okay, have a little trouble figuring out how to get the the on-screen tools to move. Again, remember, I'm old. All right, so here we pick up where we left off on page 13, where you have the number 20. All right, they're in the midst of a storm and they've decided to read a story to pass the terrible night together. The antique volume which I had taken up was The Mad Tryst of Sir Lancelot Canning, but I had called it a favourite of Usher's more in sad jest than in earnest, for in truth there is little in its uncouth and unimaginative prolixity. All right, prolixity has a footnote, so let's look down at the bottom. A long, wordy book. Okay, so, oops. The struggle is real today. Here we go. Okay, so there was little in its uncouth and unimaginative prolixity, which could have interest for the lofty and spiritual ideality of my friend. It was, however, the only book immediately at hand, and I indulged a vague hope that the excitement which now agitated the hypochondriac might find relief, for the history of mental disorders full of similar anomalies, even in the extremest of follies, which I should read. Now, he does call him a hypochondriac right here, the agitated hypochondriac. And typically, the word hypochondriac means someone who believes he or she is sick all the time, and perhaps maybe it isn't. And the sickness is in his or her head, which could be the case with Roderick, because his, remember, is more of a mental sickness. Okay? I had arrived at the well portion of the story where Ethelred, the hero of the tryst, having sought in vain for peaceable admission to the dwelling of the hermit, proceeds to make good an entrance by force. Here, it will be remembered, the words of the narrative runs thus. Now, in this part that I'm about to read, the unnamed narrator is reading from the story The Mad Tryst. And Ethelred, who was by nature of a doughty heart, and who was now mighty withal, on account of the powerfulness of wine which he had drunken, waited no longer to hold parley with the hermit, who in sooth was of an obstinate and maliceful turn, but, feeling the rein upon his shoulders, maliceful, obstinate and maliceful turn, but feeling the rein upon his shoulders, and fearing the rising of the tempest, uplifted his mace outright, and with blows made quickly room in the plankings of the door of his gauntleted hand. And now pulling therewith sturdily, he so cracked and ripped and tore all asunder that the noise of the dry and hollow-sounding wood alarmed and reverberated throughout the forest. So the part that he's read is where Ethelred, who's drunk with wine, takes his mace, and y'all, his mace is a weapon that usually has like a spiked ball at the end, but it's made of metal, the whole weapon. And he is smashing the door with it, and he smashes the door open of the hermit's home. At the termination of this sentence, I started, which means he jumped, and for a moment paused, for it appeared to me, although I at once concluded that my excited fantasy had deceived me, it appeared to me, from some very remote portion of the mansion, there came indistinctly to my ears what might have been, in this exact similarity of character, the echo, but a stifled and dull one certainly, of the very cracking and ripping sound which Sir Lancelot had so peculiarly described. It was beyond doubt the coincidence alone which had arrested my attention. For amid the rattling of the sashes of the casements and the ordinary commingled noises of the still increasing storm, the sound in itself had nothing, surely, which should have interested or disturbed me. I continued with the story. So in this part, the unnamed narrator stopped reading the story because he thought that he was hearing some of those sounds, and he decides, oh, I'm just hearing things. So here we are on page 14. So he goes back to the story. But the good companion Ethelred, now entering within the door, was sore enraged, and amazed to perceive no signal of the maliceful hermit, but in the stead, therefore, a dragon of a scaly and prodigious demeanour, of a fiery tongue, which sate in guard before a palace of gold with a floor of silver. And Ethelred uplifted his mace and struck upon the head of the dragon, which fell before him, and gave up his pesty breath with a shriek so horrid and harsh, and withal so piercing, that Ethelred had feigned to close his ears with his hands against the dreadful noise of it, the like whereof was never before heard. Here again I paused abruptly, and now with a feeling of wild amazement, for there could no doubt whatever that, in this instance, I did actually hear, although from what direction it proceeded I found it impossible to say, a low and apparently distant but harsh, protracted, and most unusual screaming or grating sound, the exact counterpart of what my fancy had already conjured up for the dragon's unnatural shriek as described by the romancer. So again, he's hearing noises outside his room that are described in the story that he's reading. Oppressed as I certainly was upon the occurrence of the second and most extraordinary coincidence, by 1,000 conflicting sensations in which wonder and extreme terror were predominant, I still retained sufficient presence of mind to avoid exciting, by any observation, the sensitive nervousness of my companion. I was by no means certain that he had noticed the sounds in question, but as I placed my hand upon his shoulder, there came a strong shudder over his whole person. A sickly smile quivered about his lips, and I saw that he spoke in a low, hurried, and gibbering murmur, as if unconscious of my presence. Bending closely over him, I at length drank in the hideous import of his words. Not hear it? Yes, I hear it, and have heard it. Long, many minutes, many hours, many days have I heard it, yet I dared not. Oh, pity me. Miserable wretch I am. I dared not. We have put her living in the tomb. Said I not that my senses were acute? I now tell you that I heard her first feeble movements in the hollow coffin. I heard them many days ago. Yet I dared not speak. And now, tonight, do I not distinguish that heavy and horrible beating of her heart? Madman! Here he sprang furiously to his feet and shrieked out his syllables as if in the effort he were giving up his soul. Madman, I tell you that she now stands without the door. Woo, holy smokitos. So let me tell you what's happened here. I bet y'all have figured it out. They buried Lady Madeline, put her in the tomb, and the casket in the bottom portion of the home. But she wasn't dead. She was really in a cataleptical state, and her brother hears her coming back to herself. Not coming back to life because she wasn't dead, but coming out of this cataleptical comatose state. And he does nothing. He doesn't go down there. And she, notice the picture, she scratches and claws her way out of the coffin. And she is now, when he says, I tell you that she stands without the door, she is standing outside the door of the bedroom at this moment. Which I think is probably a good place for us to stop with this recording, because I'm trying not to make them too long so they will upload, but we are at the top of page 15. I do want you to look at the questions. What evidence earlier in the text suggests that Lady Madeline was buried alive? Remember we talked about that color in her cheeks and on her chest? Someone who's dead would not have coloring. Okay? All right. So, we'll come back to it. Let's see what happens next.